Good morning and welcome to another beautiful 6 degree below zero day here in Minnesota. Over the last few weeks we've done a lot of winter testing, the overnight seeing if you can stay in the car test, the range test in the winter, and seeing how my car behaves. And it opened up the question of, with the different tires I have, with the road trips I've done, the supercharging, is my car a good benchmark for what you should be expecting? So I have a friend, Dustin, who's about to drop off his Model Y, same year, stock tires, and we are going to do the same loop test with his car and then my car and see how those two compare. So we should get a benchmark, and when you can see the results we get here, you can compare that to what you might be seeing, or it'll give you a little better idea of what you can expect if you get an EV in a climate like this that is freezing my ears off. So we're going to get started. I'll give you more details in the car where it's not so frigid. All right, we are in Dustin's car. We are just starting out here, 2 below according to the car, 59%, 9:43 a.m. We're going to do a loop and try to make this match and see how it compares to my car. All right, so we're just underway here. My first impressions are the white seats and white interior is very nice. It's very bright in here. I still think we made the right choice for our family with going with the black seats, with how active my daughter is in running around and climbing around in the car. I like the look of it, but I'm happy we went with the black for us. The car is very clean, only 10,000 miles on it, so about 12,000 less than what we have on ours. It's a little bizarro world because, you know, in your own car you set up exactly how your seat goes, exactly your steering wheel, the mirrors and everything, and trying to recreate that in another car is always a little strange. So I'm not quite as dialed in on that aspect of it, but obviously that's just a matter of tinkering and you know, playing with things. I do really like the white exterior. I think that looks really sharp. This car also has the aero wheel caps still on the tires. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference on this in-town driving, but it probably will make a slight difference in the highway portion of the test. Just got on the highway. The speed limit is 70 miles an hour. We will be going 75 just to stay with the flow of traffic and have a consistent test. And it'll be a little more comparative to what we did before. The temperature outside, according to the car, is now 0 degrees. Really warming up here. So although this car doesn't have the FSD enabled, it does have regular autopilot. And so that is fantastic lane keeping, adaptive cruise control. I guess lane centering is a better way to describe it, but so I'll just be using that basic version of autopilot for this test. And this is going to be a shorter route. Hopefully the comparison is still pretty apt, but there's a couple factors here. Obviously I don't want to put a ton of miles on his car. I also don't want to have him have to pick up his car with 0% on the battery. So when we get back, I will plug it in and charge it up. Only level 2, but I'll charge that up at my house until he picks it up. And this brings up an etiquette point that I didn't even think of until after a friend with a Model 3 had visited it and they left. And I realized as I was saying goodbye to them in the driveway that the courteous thing would have been to offer them the ability to charge while they were visiting. So if you have friends with an electric vehicle and they stop by, even though they might not need it, will probably refuse it. It's always nice to offer a charge. And just like typical driving, we had a lane closure, got stuck behind a semi, so you know that kind of stuff's going to happen. Hopefully it happens consistently enough between the two tests that it's not going to make a big difference. Now, I did misspeak earlier. This car does have Navigate on autopilot and those other features because full self-driving has been purchased, but this car is not on the beta program. So they do have the Navigate on autopilot, and you can just do the lane change with a signal, so that's pretty nice. We're at about 24 miles here, 420 watt hours per mile, and we're going to go a little bit further, and we're going to turn around in about 7 miles here now at Faribault. Interestingly, we're now down to 44%, so we've lost 15% since we started driving, and we've only gone 25 miles, so another cold day. There is some wind out here, and we are losing range quickly. We'll see how we do on the return trip. I'm going to take this exit and head us back north. Alright, no slowdowns there. And as we head back north, we've gone 32 miles in 33 minutes at 406 watt hours per mile. Alright, had to speed up to 75 to let that semi get back to the right lane. We're headed north now and just rolling out. Although the car is waffling between 0 degrees Fahrenheit and -1, according to the app, we're in the middle of the trip at 2 below 0. Alright, just getting off the highway here and back onto the side road. Got a couple stoplights, and then we'll be heading up to home. According to the trip meter, as we're getting off the highway, we've gone 59 miles with an average of 395 watt hours per mile. I imagine that will continue to drop as we are now at lower speeds, even though we are going up and down some hills. So we'll get back to the house, collect these numbers, and then do the same test in my car and see how they compare. So far, this one has surprised me at how much it did consume. So maybe I'm pretty on par, which would be great, because then I'm sharing accurate information with all of you. Okay, end of the trip, and we've gone 64 miles. Took an hour and 5 minutes, and we used 388 watt hours per mile. If we go over to the energy graph, you can see obviously we came down quite a bit as we got back into town. Those are our trip numbers. We ended at 1050 with 25%, and we'll see how that compares. All right, so here we are back in my car. The seat's in the right position, usual dark interior, and we're at 57%. After a little running around this morning, but Dustin had driven on the freeway before he brought his car to our house. So just for a few minutes as I was getting some stuff ready, I put the aero caps back on just to make this test as apples to apples as I could. In those few minutes, I did charge up the car just to warm up the pack a little bit, as if we had been driving on the highway like he had been. We started the test with his car at 59%, I believe, and I'm kind of hovering between 57 and 58. It keeps going back and forth, so right on the edge there. So we're at a similar state of charge. We will do the exact same route, same speeds, and see what our results are. So let's hit the road. The other difference we're going to see is that the car is saying 15 degrees. The phone app is saying 12 degrees now. Obviously, that's about a 10 to 14 degree difference than what we had this morning. But this battery pack also hasn't been driven. The charging was just a few minutes. So I think we're going to be relatively comparable. We'll have to figure that temperature variation in a little bit, but otherwise this test is going to be very, very similar. And rather than waiting through all these stoplights, I'll pick you back up when we get on the highway. So the car's now saying 12 degrees Fahrenheit. We're set at 75 and just gonna power down the road. So far on the trip meter, it's saying we've used 372 watt hours per mile, but obviously that was all in town until just now, so we'll watch how that creeps up. Alright, just about to Faribault. We just passed 30 miles. Our energy graph is saying 370 for the last 30 miles, so significantly less than what we saw in the colder morning. But we'll get back on the highway here and back up to 75. All right, down to 38% now, so we've lost 20% and gone 34 miles. I feel like that's a little better than this morning, but obviously I'll have to look. I'm guessing that's mostly due to temperature. Still saying we're at 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but this is making me think I might need to do this test again tonight, a third time, so the temperatures are closer. Let's see how we're doing when we get closer to home. Alright, just getting back off the highway here and back on the side streets to get back home. And so far we've gone 59 miles and have an average energy usage of 367 watt hours per mile. Obviously we'll see what this says when we get home. I think it's probably going to crush this morning's results. Sure, the drive was different but similar enough that I had a couple speed ups, a couple slowdowns, got behind a couple semis for a little bit like I did the last time. If anything, a little more this morning, which would have given an advantage. But we'll wrap up at home with the results from this run and be able to compare them. Okay, 3:32, we got home with 23% and 64 miles. Took just over an hour. If there's any variation there, I'm guessing that's stoplights. Everything else is pretty similar. Average watt hour per mile is 359, which is, I think, considerably better than this morning. But the temperature is, according to the car, 13 degrees. According to the weather app, 12 degrees. So I think that's going to be our difference there. When I stopped here, I took a look at the temperatures we're going to be having over the next couple days, and it is going to get warmer. And even tonight, it's not going to get down below about 7 above zero. So I can't do an exact replica of this morning's test in the next couple days. But what I think I'm going to do is pop the aero caps back off, charge this up again to about the 58-60% level, and then run the test again this evening when it is a little bit cooler, and then we can at least get a decent picture between what the aero caps do compared to the exposed rims. Obviously there will still be a little temperature difference, but it's going to be a lot closer than the 14 degree difference we had between these two tests. So now let's get in, get it charging up, and I'll pick you up later. It's just after 7:30 at night here. Just finished charging back up to about 60%, and the temperature is about 9 degrees here in Burnsville, so a little colder than this afternoon, but warmer than this morning. And I did take off the aero cap, so we'll see how much difference that makes. We'll do the same route and see how we do. Just on the first couple roads here, driving at night, I'm noticing my natural tendency is to drive a little slower in the dark. So I'm trying to be conscious of that and keep the speeds up to where we were earlier in the day. But other than the stoplights we're going to hit, there's way less traffic than this afternoon and even less than there was this morning. So I'm guessing this test is going to run maybe a couple minutes shorter than the others. Alright, up on the highway and at 75, got it set. Traffic is very light, so we shouldn't be having to slow down for much, but we also won't have those instances where we're backed up behind a semi, getting a little draft action either. Okay, we just hit 30 miles, and it's taken 30 minutes, and we are at 416 watt hours per mile. And here we are. The person on the ramp in front of me is taking their very sweet time. Okay, that was a really good example of why you want to hit entrance ramps at speed. That person is still not going the speed limit, and we're going very slow up the ramp, and there was traffic coming up behind us, so had to scoot around them. Another good example of how speed and punch of an EV can get you out of some potentially dangerous situations and put you in a better spot. But now we should have pretty clear sailing all the way back up. We're set at 75 again, and since there won't be much to see, I will pick you back up as we exit the highway. Just getting off the interstate here and at the red light and about to continue through town. Doing pretty well. After we slowed down, our watt hour per mile dropped down to 398. So that's pretty good. It'll be really interesting to chart how this difference between aero caps and no aero caps works out. So we'll catch up when we get home. Alright, we just got home. We've got 21%. That took us about an hour and 4 minutes. 64 miles again. Used 25 kilowatt hours with an average watt hour per mile of 388. I definitely think we used more kilowatt hours, so that's probably worse than this afternoon, which is expected. It's a little colder, but we also have the aero caps off, and we'll take a look at that in the studio, so I'll catch you in there. First, let's compare the watt hours per mile used with the aero caps on the wheels. At 2 below zero, in blue you can see our average went from 406 at our turnaround point to 388 at the finish. In red, we've got our 12 degree above zero test, 14 degrees higher, and that's reflected in the lower consumption of 370 watt hour per mile at the turnaround and averaging 359 by the finish. Now let's bring in the 8 degree test without the aero caps, and you'll see that even with the mid-range temperature, the green line begins at 416 watt hour per mile, but does sink back down to the consumption level of the cold test of 388 by the end. But that temperature difference was about 70% between our other tests, so we can get a sense of what that consumption could have been with the aero caps on with this yellow line, and we can see it's considerably lower than our actual. The gold in the chart below also shows the difference in kilowatt hours consumed with the same vehicle, moderate temperature changes, but with and without the aero caps. So did all this really impact our range? Looking at the difference in the state of charge, we can see the 2 below zero test in blue lost 34% from 59 to 25 over the length of the test. Surprising to me was that both vehicles lost the same amount of range, 34%, even though my car was showing better efficiency in higher temperatures. I'm guessing this is a battery calibration issue because all things being equal, my total range would be 92% of Dustin's. This could be due to driving and charging habits, which have been pretty inconsistent for me in the world of work from home. We'll see how things shake out on our next road trip, where we'll be traveling and charging consistently for a while. The upside for you is that you should feel confident that my range tests will be on the conservative side compared to what you might see. Now let's bring in the green line indicating our test without the aero caps. It's a little hard to see at the top because we started our test with the same 59% state of charge as our first drive, but at the end you can see it's dropped down below both lines, losing 38% in just over an hour of mixed driving. So the aero caps can save you about 4% battery per hour, or, judging by the other chart, make the difference about a 10 degree Fahrenheit change would to your range. This tells me that I'll definitely be using the aero caps for our road trip and working on calibrating the pack to get closer to Dustin's benchmark. Speaking of whom, a huge thank you to Dustin for sharing his car with me. So I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Thanks a lot for watching, have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.